Clock. It's a little after 6 o'clock p.m., so I'd like to call this meeting of the Independent School District 181 School Board to order. We will start with roll call.
Kevin Boyles.
Here.
Michelle Brecken.
Here.
DJ Donlinger. Randy Heidemann.
Here.
Sarah Spear.
Here.
John Lord.
Here.
5 of the 6 present.
Okay, should we do Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And public notice was given, but a note for the record once again that Director Ward is attending virtually from the following address, 16 Red Poinciana Drive in Fort Myers, Florida. So we have 5 of 6 board members present. Next up, we have approval of the agenda as amended. The amendment to the agenda was to add a recognition.
I'll make a motion to approve. I'll second.
We have a motion by Director Spear and a second by Director Brecken. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Same sign. Motion passes. And now we'll move on to public input. A member of the public can address the board during this time. I have 3 cards at this time. If anybody else has one, bring it up, please. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes. Complaints or allegations against students or employees may not be discussed due to data privacy. Complaints or allegations must be submitted in writing to Superintendent Hahn. The Board of Education and Superintendent will not converse or interact with the guests to address the topics discussed at this time. And so we'll start with Connie Liskiel.
Good evening. I am Connie Licio. I'm a retired teacher. I've worked in the district for over 30 decades. I'm very grateful and proud to have worked for the district. Our kids received outstanding opportunities and have gone on to be very happy and successful. And first of all, I want to thank Dr. Hahn and the other leaders in the room who I know are veteran educators, and it's been just a rough couple of weeks here, and what I'm here to speak about isn't anything new. I think it might be the 34th time I've spoken on behalf of the paraprofessionals in the district. When I first started teaching in 1988 was the first time I dealt with a student who was suicidal. And the attention was brought to me by what was called a teaching assistant in 1988. And I know the problem has not gotten less, unfortunately. It's becoming more widespread. There are no boundaries, there are no limits. And I think it's just such a shame that when it comes to budget cuts, and I know that that's always a concern every year, it seems as though what is cut first are those that are boots on the ground in the schools. And if you're not in the schools, and I guess I'm speaking to the school board members, if you haven't spent time, I implore you, I beg you to walk with a teaching assistant or a paraprofessional, go through their day. The kids in the schools don't know who's certified, they don't know what their title is, they know they have an adult there that loves them and cares for them, and we need more boots on the ground, more eyes, more hearts in the school. It's a shame what they're paid. Retail workers start out with a higher wage than what the paraprofessionals do, and I look at what I do now as a retired educator working in retail as compared to what my friends, the paraprofessionals, do. There's no comparison on the life-changing events that they do every single day. I've had friends who've had to leave the schools who were paraprofessionals, mainly because of financial concerns. They took the job initially because they wanted the same schedules as their own children, only to find out they needed to add a second and third job to even exist. When budget concerns come around and when you're making the decisions, I implore you, I beg you to not add any more staff who are not in the schools with the kids. I don't see a need for adding more curriculum directors, assessment people, benchmark people. Not that what they do is not important. However, At this time, the crisis that we're in, there is nothing more important than having the caring people in the schools with the kids. They're the ones that know. Alertness, caring, again, the kids don't know what the adults' titles are. They know that this person is a safe one that I can go to and they'll help me and they'll listen. The kids just all want to be recognized and heard no matter where they're at in their educational career. So again, my hope, my prayer would be that paraprofessionals are paid the wage that they deserve. You want to attract good people, you want to maintain those good people, and sadly, it's not happening. So again, thank you to the veteran educators. I know you get it. It's just the new people, I beg you, go into the schools, walk a day with the people, and then decide if they're worth paying more. Thank you.
Tony Bauer.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to respectfully ask all of you to reconsider the school calendar's omission of the word Christmas of the name of that break. And first, to call for public input as to citizen parental preferences for recognizing it. And secondly, to put the topic of amending the school calendar once again back on this board's agenda. The omission of the word Christmas amounts to nothing more than promoting one culture over another. All the while, the district pretends that it's about being inclusive. Students will be exposed to an entire month recognizing Native Americans while simultaneously denying the recognition of Christian Americans. Unless the winter break occurs at a time other than December 24th to January 2nd, your intentions are very obvious. We don't break for winter. We break for Christmas celebrations, and we always have. And it's not about excluding those of the Jewish faith either. For the record, Hanukkah will be celebrated from December 7th to the 15th in 2013. That does not fall within the winter break dates. It's obvious this policy is directed more on achieving a totally secular society while focusing on what makes us different from one another instead of on what unites us, as if the differences were more important. I certainly don't begrudge anyone their culture, customs, and contribution to our country. But it goes without saying it is not being equitable, inclusive, fair, or right to promote one race or culture at the expense of another. Yes, discrimination is wrong, but reverse discrimination is just as wrong. Please seek out the stakeholder input that you always claim to value and stop pretending that one voice in dissent outweighs the many, albeit passive, voices of agreement. I pray that you will make the right decision. I pray that you'll make the truthful decision. Thank you.
And next up is Kay Paulus.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Kay Paulus. I have 2 children who are graduates of Brainerd High School, and my youngest is in 9th grade. I sent each of you an email earlier today, and if you didn't get time to read it, I understand. I know everybody's busy, but I wanted you to, first of all, be able to put a face and a voice to a name, so I'm not just some generic person on the other side of the email, but then also to just expand a little bit on where I'm coming from, because I found out from another parent that my daughter's 9th grade textbook included transgender ideology and pushing a viewpoint that is at odds with our faith and the viewpoint of many people in our community. When my older 2 kids went through AP Human Geo, I could flip through their textbook. There was nothing in it about LGBTQIA+, and certainly nothing about making the transgender movement seem like fact and seem like normal. And it kind of shook my trust in our public schools that if my daughter is having this ideology presented in a class that seemingly has nothing to do with sexuality, where else is she getting this viewpoint pushed on her? Is it in math class? Is it in, her English class or her gym class? So I guess I just wanted to reach out to open a dialogue. I am hoping that it is the start of a conversation. And that said, I can't stay for the rest of the meeting due to a prior commitment, but I want to sincerely thank you guys for your time, and you have my email and phone number, so please reach out if you want to include me in further conversations. Thank you very much.
All right, let's move on to recognitions, and maybe since we have 4 board members present, we can spread the love around a little bit. Director Brecken, you want to start with the first one?
Be happy to. Congratulations to Kate Statham and Gavin Holzel for being AAA award winners. The MSHSL AAA award recognizes excellence in academics, arts, and athletics.
I guess I'll do the next one, which is congratulations to the following Warrior dance team members named All-Conference. On the high kick All-Conference, Madison Avery, Bailey Clausen, B. Hartwig, Semi Hiltner, and Cassidy Reardon. High kick honorable mention, Cameron Anderson and Avery Horn. Jazz All-Conference, Madison Avery, Bailey Clausen, and Semi Hiltner. And Jazz honorable mention, Ava Clow and Avery Horn.
And congratulations to Amira Cosgrove for having her drawing of the Brainerd Tower being selected for My District, My Minnesota program. Students were invited to submit photos or drawings of life in their district, and then each senator then chose the one they felt was the best representation of their district. And Amira her submission was chosen to represent District 6. So her drawing will be on view in the Minnesota Senate building for the rest of 2023.
Congratulations to the Brainerd varsity cheerleading team for being the 2023 Minnesota Cheer Coaches Association co-ed non-tumble state champions. This is the 2nd year in a row. They also won the Minnesota Cheerleading Coaches Association Leadership Award. This award is presented to the team who displays leadership within their school and community.
Thank you. All right, let's move on to the approval of the minutes from the January 9th organizational school board meeting.
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes from the organizational school board meeting on January 9th.
Second.
We have a motion from Director Brecken and a second from Director Heidman. Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Next up is the approval of the regular school board meeting minutes from January 9th, 2023.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion from Director Ward with a second by Director Spear. All those in favor signify.
Aye.
Those
Aye.
opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Approval of consent calendar is next up.
I'll make a motion to approve. And I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion from Director Spear and a second from Director Brecken. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Presentations, I believe we just have the one tonight, which is transportation. So we have Kevra and Fran joining us.
So thanks for having us tonight. And also thank you to all of the Warrior parents for their patience with the busing. I know it is a hard and large frustration, as each day we have between 1 and 3 routes being canceled with our driver shortage. The good news is we hired 2 drivers today, so they'll be starting within the next 2 to 3 weeks. For our driver update, we do have 4 drivers out currently on medical. Since January 1, like I just said, we've had between 1 and 4 routes down each day, which is not ideal. Over the course of the last 2 years, and for the first time in our 75 years, we've had to cancel routes, which is very tough to do. We had a driver quit on us with a voicemail one evening for the next morning. So those situations are things we cannot plan for. I've been actively trying to hire and cannot get people to come to interviews, let alone get them into training and get them licensed. But I am continually trying to get people in and get them hired. With that being said, in about 3 weeks, we should have down to maybe 1 route a day or less being not covered. So we do have light at the end of the tunnel coming. Just a couple more weeks of some unknown days ahead, unfortunately.
And Kevin, do you want to add? I know we've asked, but I think when you have licensed drivers such as mechanics and people in the office, basically we're emptying an office to cover those bus routes as well, correct?
Yes, we have nobody in our office at all during route times, which I know is another frustration of parents. Obvious frustration of parents when they call in and nobody answers the phone, because I've got all of our mechanics out driving. All of our office staff is out driving as well, just to try not to cancel any more routes for the day. So we're all out driving in a bus.
I think, Fran, you've worked on a couple creative solutions, one of which I think you have the first one done to fruition, hopefully. So Fran, as a router, has been able, and our transportation director knows where buses are crisscrossing. So we've tried to identify some areas of need, and I think you have the first one, I think, established. I don't know if you want to explain that more.
Yes, we're really working hard for parents to make this not so hard on them. So one of the things we've been asked is, is there any other bus I can ride? So what I've done is gone out and looked at the routes and just determined if there's buses that are getting close to other routes, even in the rural areas, maybe we can map it out so parents can meet a bus at a corner close to their home, at least, and ride a different bus in on a day that their bus may not be running. So today we did try that with our first bus, and that bus happens to stop in Norwood. So we have a bus covering all of Norwood Street, which covers about 50 to 75 kids. It's probably pretty much the bus load there. Then the rural stops, we've just pinpoint areas where we have other buses going by very closely to homes. And we're going to test it and see how families respond. So we have put that out on our website. The alternate possible stops for families, we also sent it out in our Sky Alert when we sent out our message to families today saying your bus is not running. If you cannot find a way to get your children to school, we do have some alternate options for you and listed those for them. So, the problem with it is it's a complex system we have, and so parents can get confused and then they're frustrated about that, well, what does this really mean? So I'm planning on being in bright and early tomorrow to answer any questions. I anticipate we may get some phone calls, and hopefully we'll be able to clarify things as we go along, and I'm hoping to catch some of it in time for families to go ahead and catch a bus if they need it and are unable to. And Reichert's has been extremely responsive. I mentioned this to LC this evening. We've talked about it. We actually talked about it in a meeting, this possibility of doing this, and he thought it was a great plan to pilot this particular route. It's going to be gone just tomorrow afternoon, so we have time to see how this all plays out, and if it works for us and doesn't create more problems than it helps, then we'll continue going through more routes and trying to provide routes. Then we know we won't pick a route we'll pick a route that we can replace, you know what I mean, that could be missing. So yeah, those are some of the strategies we're working on, and just mostly trying to be kind and understanding to families, because we do understand. It's very traumatic for kids. We had one little girl say, her mom said, she doesn't want to miss school, but I can't get her there, So of course, then you're like, we have to find a way to get this little girl to school. And we do on those cases and have been all along. But this is on a bigger scale. We're going to try to do more of it.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that we don't just throw a dart at a board and say, okay, that route is not going tomorrow. You know, there are thoughts that go into how close to town is that route. That's a factor that plays into this. We only have a handful of drivers that will drive multiple routes. It is very intimidating to get in a bus in the dark at 5:30 in the morning and go into a section of the county that you've never been in before with a map, even though it is, you know, turn by turn, and pick up students you don't know. So that we do only have a handful of drivers that are willing to do that. And those drivers are actually assigned to other routes. So it's a catch-22, right? We have to shut one route down to have another one go. So it's also, how many times have we shut this route down? Okay, so then we shut that route down so we can cover this route. How close to town are those people? How heavy ridership do we have on that route? There's a lot of factors that come into play. If a route is close to town and has light ridership, that does play a large factor into if that route gets canceled or not, versus if, let's say, a route is out near Garrison or County 2 and has a heavy ridership, we're gonna make sure that route comes in for sure over a route that has lighter ridership very close to town. Does that make sense? So I think people think, a lot of parents just think that we continuously just throw a dart and pick a route or two every day. And I just want you to know that there's a lot of thought that goes into it. We coordinate a lot with Fran in the district office to try to make sure that we're evening it out as best as we can. But we do have our limitations on which routes we can close on particular days, so.
So are you making these assessments every day
Yes,
about what to do for the next day?
yes, all day long.
Okay. And parents are notified via Skylert by what time?
We usually have them, like, they've been notified by 5 before
5, okay.
Rebecca leaves work. She tries to put those sky alerts out. Sometimes if we have a last minute, then I do that in the morning.
Okay.
And I start right at 5 because I don't want to pull people out of bed at 3 o'clock in the morning. But I will start right at 5 and send them a message out if we have a driver. We had a driver text in sick this morning.
Okay.
So, you know, there's not much you can do when they do it at that last minute. But yes, we do that. I just want to mention that I also just spoke with Josh in Crosby Ironton Transportation. That bus company has no buses for us. I was actually trying to get a student a ride to care and treatment, and he said, I'm done, I'm strapped. I have everybody driving. And we were looking at maybe even like in February, he could cover a few days. And this is just for our district stuff that I was asking for. And he says, this driver's out, this driver's gonna be out, I'm gonna be gone. You know, we just aren't gonna, we don't think we'll be able to fill it. He would help us if he could. And he's still kind of checking if he can. But, you know, I was hoping maybe he had somebody else coming to Brainerd already and could throw some of our kids on his bus, but one of his vehicles. So those neighboring guys are all in the same boat we're in, is what we're finding.
Well, I submit it's a national issue still. The media is just not covering it anymore because it's
Exactly.
not interesting, but
Exactly right.
as I drive around everywhere that I go, I see signs everywhere for hiring bus drivers.
Yeah, if you look on some of the websites, school districts up, Forest Lake is one that I look at periodically. They always have 3 or 4 buses that are not running, roads are not running.
Do you want to talk about there's a link on the website that's live time? Do you want to talk about that too?
Yes, we did add, we've been trying to do everything we can to communicate, because that's been our biggest black eye. We're not giving the people information in a timely fashion. And granted, if you give them the information at 5 o'clock at night, they have to make a plan for tomorrow morning. That's probably not enough time for most people. But what I try to explain to people is this company is still working on trying to replace those drivers. They're gonna do everything in their power to get a hold of anybody they can, shuffle and juggle and make it work to get those routes up and running. So if we did it too early, say we know we're gonna have a driver out for a week, do they really want us just to shut the route down for a week? You know, and so there's all of that juggling. Maybe that's a different answer someday, you know, but for right now, we're just trying to keep those routes alive. So the 5 o'clock was kind of our cutoff, so people would have some time. but they're not going to ever feel like they have enough time to, plan, actually make a plan. And I don't really want them to make a plan because we want our buses to be on the road, all of them.
Right.
But on our district website, it's
I
highlighted
saw
right in
that.
yellow, so anybody can click on that. And what's nice is if she's getting a phone call, she's typing on that, so it's automatically live data. So our families, again, it's trying to give as much information as quickly and accurately as possible as well.
Yeah, as soon as they tell us the bus is not running, this morning, I got the message at about 4:30. I got up about 4:45. I put it on the website. I sent out a Sky Alert. I have a whole rhythm, that I do. Then we send information off to the principals about it. And we are now sending out not just a phone message, but also an email to our families. So there's all different ways they can get that information. And we've been continually telling folks, check the website. If anything changes, that's the first place it's going to be. So, yeah.
I'm glad that you're got some sort of a backup plan, because the phone calls I was getting from parents, what's the plan? What's plan B? And I said, I don't know. So I'm glad you've taken a look at maybe consolidating some routes, because parents also have a problem being late for work. So it's not only getting the students, but also the parents getting to work on time. So I'm happy that there's something that's being worked on as far as a consolidation of some routes and having kids maybe get picked up by a different bus. So thank you for looking at that.
Absolutely, Director Heidemann. And also, we have some other plans in place that we'll be trying as we move forward. So we have some shifting and juggling that we're going to try to continue to do. We may try to combine some more routes permanently to minimize. So, yeah, lots of things in the works.
Yeah, and I know on Facebook, you guys it was a long advertisement trying to get drivers, and, I've talked to Mike, and, yeah, we hire someone, and we get them trained, then a week later, they quit. So you're like every other business, you're trying to hire people and keep people, and it's tough.
For us, the issue is it's our kids. It's our precious cargo, the most precious you can have. And so we take it so seriously because of that. And like you said, parents still have to work to take care of their families, So, yeah, I do take it very personally. It means a lot. And
The district, and in the district, we thank you so much for all that you do for our kids, because the bus drivers, for almost for everybody that rides a bus, the bus driver is the first person the child sees and the last person the child sees. And just like the paras and the educators and all the staff, everybody is so important to the success of that child in their public education, not alone only the public safety. And you guys do a great job, in my opinion, with the public safety of our kids and checking things out, making sure that they're going to be safe when they get on that bus, no matter what the weather conditions are, or let people know that it is not safe or whatever. And I know you're, like Director Heidemann said, I know that you're doing a lot of advertising. Is there anything that you would like to say to promote your incentives right now, so that the media might pick it up and put something in print about that what kind of incentives there are for anybody that would like to sign up to be a bus driver?
You can apply on reichertbus.com/apply, sorry. And there is a $500 hiring bonus. And for those parents who are frustrated, it does not help the application process by putting negative feedback on the ads on Facebook. Nobody wants to work for a place that has negative feedback online. So please call us and let us help you with your complaints and not post it there. Thank you.
I think you guys do longevity stipends.
Yes.
So I know the holiday was there's kind of a bonus there too.
We bonus a lot. I do payroll, I know. We reward our employees. We are a large family at work. We are third generation. 75 years, Reichert family. That is not something a lot of businesses can say. and we are very proud of it. You know, I've been there 25 years, and Riker is my family. You know, we have good days, we have bad days, but I think we treat our staff very well. They have treated me very well for 25 years. And I think a year ago, we did like our average retention was 12 or 15 years. There's a large chunk of drivers that have been there over 20 years. It's outstanding amount. You know, it's crazy how long people have been there. And you don't get that sort of loyalty if it's a bad business. So we have a lot of elderly drivers that, you know, are going to want to retire at some point. So we definitely need a lot more drivers.
So you mentioned you have, did I hear 2 or 3 drivers hired? 2?
We hired 2 just
2.
today.
It'll come online at some point. They still got to go through the formalities of the licensing process and all that. Did that all get cleaned up? They can do that all here in Brainerd now? They don't have to go to
Yes.
St. Cloud anymore?
Yes. They can
Okay,
do
so that helps a lot.
Helps
Right,
a
that was
lot.
a real pain a year and a half ago, trying to get that all sorted
Yes, it
out.
was.
Then the second thing is you mentioned 4 on medical leave. So in theory, they're sitting on the bench waiting to come back in the game at some
Yes.
point, and they'll stagger as that kind of comes in there. So
Correct.
the combination of that, so we've really got sort of theoretically 6 sideline drivers at the moment. Too.
Correct.
And then I should probably know a little bit more about this, but what about activity buses? How's everything going with the activity stuff?
Those have been going really well. We have not missed any activities. Those have been all covered. There's been no issues with those at all. Unless I,
Not from my,
yeah.
I haven't heard anything on that director.
Okay, I haven't heard anything, that's why I was curious.
No.
And I would hear it if
But
there
I
was,
hate the whole no news is good news and to
Oh,
get
no.
that phone call tomorrow, right?
right?
No,
We're definitely busy in activities. So
Yeah, they're covering the activities fine.
yeah, winter's the absolute busiest, and I've gotten no negative reports on the activities at all. So LC he's our dispatcher, our general manager. He is absolutely fabulous. I don't know what we would do without him.
Yeah, the shuffling act he does every day is just magical. He's an amazing person.
He is, yeah,
He knows his stuff. So he was up at 3 o'clock in the morning, sending me the message. this morning.
yes.
It's not unheard of. That's what he does. So,
He's probably going to walk in tomorrow and ask for a raise.
it's kind of like, you know, he probably told them when they hired him, when they asked him what he wanted, that they couldn't afford him.
Right.
So just pay him what they can.
Well, again, echoing Director Ward's sentiments, I mean, it is appreciated. The district appreciates everything that you're doing. Again, Director Spear and I remember a year and a half ago when we were
It was ugly.
desperately trying to get ready for the start of school, and what a crazy situation that was too. So it's, you know, it's not an easy landscape to navigate, and we appreciate all the extra hours, all the extra time, not just you and LC, but everybody. And Fran, you know, we're so glad to have you inside the 4 walls of the district doing all of this stuff. It's, you know, when Norby departed for other pastures, I don't think they're greener, but they're other pastures. You know, we weren't sure what we were going to do, and here you are. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Things happen how they should. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great, thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to new business. We have just a couple of action items tonight, starting with the first revision for the 2022-2023 budget featuring Marcy Lord.
Good evening, everybody. I know that you all have been anxiously awaiting this. In your board packet is a more detailed document. You can, if you haven't already reviewed it, I'd strongly encourage it. It goes into way more detail on what is happening with this revision. You'll notice in the presentation, we really focus on the general fund. So the other funds did have some slight revisions, but they're not as significant. Janet did say you guys might want to press F5 to refresh your computer, just in case there was a change that had to be made. So in this first summary is the first revised budget. And, you know, at the last meeting, I kind of went through the financial report of the general fund and all of talked about the fund balance. So there's the unassigned, which is kind of like your general, we can use it on anything. And then below that is all of the categories that we have more restrictions on, and we're limited on what we can use those funds. So this is just a general summary from the first revised budget of last year, 21-22. And then the next summary is the audited. So how did we actually end the year? How did we close out? And it's the same summary, we just update what the actual revenues and expenses were. And then I'm gonna show you a side-by-side summary. So when you look at this, I always focus on the unassigned because like I said, that's something that you can use for anything. So the projected deficit was about 1.9 million in the revised budget, and then actuals, we ended with a $344,000 surplus. We talked about that at the last meeting with the audit, mainly due to CARES funds, transportation savings. When those routes aren't running, we are not paying that bill. The food service also ended with a $1.1 million excess, and that was projected to be a $72,000 deficit. So those are like the big picture items as far as what happened last year, what major changes compared to, with the budget compared to actual. Any questions so far? Please ask as I'm going through this, feel free. So then we take that first revised budget from 21-22. We don't know actuals at the time, so we use that and we start planning our assumptions. What do we know is going to happen the following year? 2% in the formula, we knew that was going to happen. We look at any increases in labor agreements, any other funding such as the levy, the related benefits on those labor agreements, and then also contracts. So any type of service contracts that we know the increases, we'll try to put that in all of our assumptions. And then you can see for 22-23, we had a net decrease of 13.5 FTE that we had planned in order to try to balance some of the budget. Also noted on there is the decrease in unassigned fund balance, so that 1.8 million, that was supported by the board because we looked at class sizes, we looked at other reductions, and the board at the time was not wanting to go there. So they did support that we would be at a deficit of 1.8 million, which you guys can, Director Boyles and Director Spear could speak to. So that was planning for the 22-23 preliminary budget. The enrollment projection, we were looking at about 6,000 kids, 6,006. This is a projection model from Ehlers. It looks at our prior history as well as county births. So it's very interesting to look at some of our previous data, but it had computed the 6,006. So our preliminary budget, again, this summary was updated with the assumptions and all of the estimates, and we were looking at that $1.8 million deficit for 22-23 in the unassigned. And then there's all the other categories that are very specific, and there are categories that do go into deficit, but those are planned one-time expenses. So it's not like it's going to be reoccurring every single year.
Marcy, can I ask a question, please, Mr. Chair?
Of course.
Yes.
So, Marcy, I'm going to go back to the full-time equivalent cuts. And I don't have it up on my screen right now. I just, to see you, I went off of that page. But how many of those were related to retirements as well? Do you know, offhand? And those jobs were not refilled then, or what?
That is a good question. I don't have that data right off the top of my head, but I could get it for you afterwards.
So some of that may be, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I can pull that.
John,
So some of that may be related to retirements then, is that correct?
Correct, that is correct.
Okay.
But I can't say all.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep, thank you.
So then when we go into this first budget revision, we look at our assumptions again and what has changed. So we have the October 1 count, which is submitted to the state, and then we put that into the enrollment projection model. And the change from the preliminary budget to now would be 11 students, which is, that's awesome that it's not, it's not a dramatic shift. We also update any of the federal and state awards, so the CARES funding, we did receive a couple of new awards. We also, the allocations for like title and some of our other federal awards don't come out until after we've built the budget. So we're going based off of all estimates, and this revision kind of helps fine tune the budget compared to what we had built it in June. We also, so talking about transportation and the driver shortage, in this revision is a decrease from, in the budget, we actually had 63 routes prior to COVID. They've since consolidated and rerouted so that we are down to 53 routes. But I do want to say a word of caution in that we're revising it down, but if the drivers were there, we would want all those routes back, if that makes sense. So it is a savings for this year, but it may not be reoccurring. Next year, we could very well look at adding that line item right back.
And those 63 are gen ed, special ed, or combined?
It is
Is it combined or?
combined.
Combined, okay.
Yep.
We've actually left more in the budget compared to what's running now. So there's room as they go.
Yep.
So we're
I take
keeping
that back.
number high.
63 is gen ed.
Okay. Because there's another 25 special ed or something, right?
Yeah. So
But
just
we
want to
haven't really
note
been
that.
tweaking or tinkering with those. We've been playing with the gen ed routes, right?
Right. So wanted to note that. And then the other funds, so there wasn't large adjustments made in the other funds, but food service, we did update. Last year was all free. We changed it, so we have paid meals now, so there was a change there. And then also the cost of food. We had to increase that because the cost of food has been noticeable. And then also adding the 2023A bond issuance in the debt service funds and the construction funds. So with this budget revision, the October 1 count, as I said, went down 11, so we're at about 5,996 for our estimate. And with the revision, we update the whole summary sheet, which is in your board packet. Here's just a snapshot of the general fund again. And when we do side-by-side comparison of 23 preliminary budget versus the first budget revision, we were at that projected deficit of about 1.8. Now we are at a projected deficit of 625,000, which is very refreshing to see. So we had a large change in our special ed aid. That went up around 700,000. That was a huge part of this. And then the transportation savings was the other part. There was some other adjustments, but those are the two major ones to note. So at the end of this, the projected unassigned fund balance would be at about 10.5 million or 11.3% of our expenses. And the food service changed from a excess of 51,000, and it will now be a deficit of about 227. So those are also wanted to point those out.
Marcy, why is that?
So the food service one is because the food costs going up. So we had to increase our budget on that line item.
Okay.
And luckily, we did have a surplus last year with the going away from the paid meals. So we have fund balance there to cover that.
I don't know if this is the right time to bring it up or not, but the state's proposing paying for lunches for everyone.
Going back to they
we-
did that during the pandemic, universal meals for all families. And so that's when you talk about budgeting and planning. So it's been shifting from one back to the other. And then there's a wide range of both federal and state aid. And I'm looking, Alyssa's not here, but I know Alyssa, right? Is she here? Yeah. I know she's trying to start mapping out if that happens, then what? Because it is a significant change in how you budget and plan.
The reason I asked the question, and maybe we'll be talking more about that, but I've been doing a lot of reading on that issue, and there's a lot of superintendents that are not in favor of this at all. I don't know what our position is, if we have a position or if we're going to take a position, because you know what's going to happen in 2 years. You know, they may just dump it on us.
I think the question that's coming from, the superintendent cohort across the state is, right now, when you look at the current, so now we're back to paid meals, and there's a whole free and reduced structure in an application. So based on the free and reduced structure, that also triggers compensatory aid. So it's another funding stream. So some of the fears that's come back is if you do universal meals, which is wonderful for kids and families, if you're going to do that, are you now shutting down another funding source? So again, when you look at planning over $100 million budget, and there's so many things in fluctuation, and they can't answer that question. If you do universal meals, what's the impact on compensatory aid? So there's a proposal right now to take the compensatory aid that's in existence, and which would be fiscal year 24, and have that be the floor, meaning that districts would receive no less than that amount, but that's all to be worked out in this budgeting cycle. And that's the frustrating part about, we set a budget and basically we work a whole year before almost a year and a half before you know how it finally ends up. And so what Marcy's done, I think, a great job is showing is we plan and make assumptions and hire and staff and build programs. And I think we're very conservative. So you saw we looked at almost a 1.9 in 21-22, but then we ended up with a little over $300,000 to the good. So, and again, that's going to be the fluctuation. So we always feel if we get in that 1 to 2%, that's why I think previous boards have been comfortable saying, yep, we're okay with that deficit because it's within that range. And we typically see as the year finishes out, because of conservative budgeting, we end up almost with a balanced budget. But that's why superintendents, I think, I can tell you myself as a superintendent, that's a huge concern. Because when I look at how much meals are costing and the money and the adjustments that have to be made, if they cut off another revenue stream of compensatory ed, which is about $2.4 million in our budget, and they don't replace that, then how are we supposed to plan around that? So those are the questions that are still looming, and I think they're working through as they set the budget.
And there's a nugget in there in what you said that I want to pull out, just so that it gets highlighted a little bit better, which is this is fluid. It moves all the time. So when Dr. Hahn's talking about being conservative, we're trying to plan for the worst, and the worst usually doesn't happen. So to that end, it was a $2.2 million swing over what we initially projected. When we started the budgeting process, we were saying we're going to come up short $1.9 million. We came up $345,000 positive, but we had no way of knowing that could have just as easily gone poorly. And so when you start reading things in social media where people are talking about $1.8 million and all these numbers are getting floated around, you have to understand this is in movement. This is not a situation where we've gone out and spent $2 million we don't have. This is us saying that if everything goes really badly, that could happen, but we're doing everything behind the scenes to manage it on the fly, sort of changing the tires on the bus, sorry, Fran, while we're driving it, to make sure that we're making the most of the resources that we have available to us. So I caution people that are reading up on this stuff to get the most available data, or reach out to your board members or to the district staff to get an accurate picture of what's out there. Your neighbor probably doesn't have the best information on how this works.
And 1.8 million is a large number, and when people hear that, they think, oh my gosh. But when you look at our budget of 90 million, it's 2%. So I just want to point that out too, that yeah, there's the sticker shock of 1.8 million, how are you deficit spending? But it's 2% of our budget, which is not very much.
I think right now the intent of the revision, just like Marcy explained, is kind of to give you that marker on where are we at. So again, when we started at 1.8 at the start of the year, as we're working through the year here now, we're halfway through in January, that deficit now is down to 625. So again, it's trending. So it's the predictions and the movement and the things we're adapting for are playing out in that budget.
And of course, then you have the wild card in there is enrollment can come in and make it move as well.
Right.
Right.
If we had a mass exodus, all of a sudden, this would completely change, right? This is based on what we have right now.
I guess maybe I didn't pose my question well enough, possibly. What I've been reading is there's people that are upset that we're going to be spending this much money on meals for all students, whereas we could be spending some of that money on educating kids. Because right now it's based upon family income, correct? reduced lunches, et cetera, right?
There's an application process
Yeah,
for that.
so,
So
and
so right now in our district, just to kind of give you a perspective, is we teeter right around that 50-ish% of our families. So over half of our families are qualifying into that free and reduced category. So again, when it comes to, we want and we do feed every student, but we're one of those districts that's right in the middle. It's a benefit to our students and families. In other areas, a district might not be as excited about that, depending on, again, where you're located. But for Brainerd, again, right, I think right now when they did an automatic rollover, it was 44.4%. That's why I wish Alyssa was here. So we're a high free and reduced district. So
In speaking with Director Thompson today, her concern was exactly what you said, where, okay, so 2 years down the road, if they pull that funding, then what do we? Yeah.
well, plus the fact that there are a lot of people making the argument, I think they're saying, 400 million over 2 years, I believe, for the whole state. Why don't we spend it on educating kids? Still give the reduced lunches. I'm not saying pull that away, but I mean, some people are arguing why spend that money on some. That's, I guess, where I was coming from.
So I'm hearing you right. You're saying, from your perspective, why are we feeding the kids that can afford it?
Yes. Thank you. Yeah.
and there's a lot of moving parts in what's being proposed in the budget for education. And that's our job is, again, this district's had a long history of budgeting very conservatively. We also know we have these CARES dollars that are going to time out at 24. So we're being very cautious of how those dollars have played out, again, to bring forth recommendations. And of course, our largest part of everything we do in a budget is people in front of kids. So typically when there's budget cuts, the only thing left in the district, at least for the past 15 years, is we cut people because that's the majority of your budget in the human service.
But to that end, as we've looked at this over the last 2 years that I've been on the board, we've built as deep a moat around people in front of kids as we can. It's the last thing that we look at.
Yeah, and that's where, to Director Ward's question, when you look at the staff that were reduced, a lot of that was through retirement. Looking at what are the positions that are existent that we can save, and then those who are retiring, how can we shift and adjust? But it has led to there's a couple pockets of a larger class size here, so it plays out in different areas throughout our systems.
So I always point out the fund balance policy that was revised a couple of years ago, I believe. We increased it to 10%. So with this budget revision, we'd be at 11%. But I always point out that the state recommends 3 months or 25%. So when we have our, start the finance committees, it'd be nice to talk about if we should potentially look at increasing that again, but I just want to give you a status update on where we're at with the policy versus the projection.
One subject to your correction on that one, can you go back for just a second?
Yeah.
That second bullet looks good, but it's propped up a little bit by CARES money too. So it's not quite as rosy as it looks right at the moment.
Right.
So we're still working on getting that to that magical 10% and have it be a legitimate number. But we're balancing that against what you just saw in those previous slides with the 1.8 and $1.9 million shortfall, while also trying to build that fund balance to that recommended level.
And to give a background on why it would make us uncomfortable is because if the state was not able to make payments, we would have 1 month that we'd be able to operate, and then what would we do? So if the state is doing great right now, but if it ever came to where they were withholding payments from us, we want to have something in our reserve so we can continue to operate.
So our job's not done there, is I guess what I was trying to say. We still got some work to do there.
So what's next? So you guys will approve the revised budget if all goes well. And there could be a potential second revision. I have not done one since I've been here, but that is a possibility if something was to dramatically change. If we were looking at a different projection, we would do a second revision that would be presented and approved.
What are the statutory requirements around that from a timing perspective?
I've seen districts do it in July for the previous year, which is very strange to me, but
because technically the fiscal year is ended.
Yes. Yeah, and they're basically revising to actuals, which then what, you know, in my mind, what is the point of the budget then? It is a projection, right? So revenues and expenses will be adjusted with known changes for 23-24 when we take this revised budget. Some of the things we'll talk about is the gen ed. You know, right now the governor's proposal has the 4% and 2% with inflation, which is great. We'll have to run different scenarios and then look at our projection model for incoming kindergarten, the levy, federal, and then employee contracts. And then also any other proposals like the cross subsidies that he had thrown out there for special ed and ELL. Any questions?
I have a question, please, Marcy, Mr. Chair. Third-party billing, Marcy. I know that there was at a time during my career that, you know, third-party billing, we weren't getting as much as we should have. And we kind of tried to emphasize that significantly. Can you talk about, are we getting third-party billing to what you feel is exactly maybe close to 100% of what we should be getting?
Do you want me to answer that one?
Yeah.
Director Ward, this is Heidi Hahn. So we do try to maximize all of our third-party billing revenue. So for those of you that's new, so through medical services that are provided in school. So when we have school psychologists, speech therapist, audiologist, nursing staff, the state allows us to do a third-party billing through MA. And so we have staff that are responsible for that job on top of all their other pieces. They get to do medical filing paperwork through third-party billing, and that we partner with the Paul Bunyan Co-op. So I would say in some areas, we've gotten very good at it, John. So for example, like when you looked at the certified staff, which you help work with, is there was some additional time or compensation built in to make sure they were getting that job done. One of the areas that we really need to start maximizing is our nursing staff. So our nursing staff are also eligible for that third-party billing. So if you look at the immense amount of medication administration that happens, that's a third-party billable service. And so some of that is just manpower and the time and the energy to do that paperwork. So I think there's growth for us to happen, but you are seeing that reflected when you see that special education aid come in. There's a strong connection with our third-party billing in there.
And with this revision, we did up the budget because when COVID hit, that took a dive. You know, we weren't seeing the kids, and so we couldn't third-party bill. And so now we're starting to see that coming back to the pre-pandemic levels, which is good.
Well, I'm glad to hear, Dr. Hahn, that we're looking at nursing to include the third-party billing because, and believe me, I know and understand the time put into that and the paperwork put into that. I personally understand that in a couple instances, but you know, the district, it's revenue that the district should and could and needs to generate. So I'm glad to hear that we're working on it. Thank you.
Other questions for Marcy? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you need a motion?
Oh, yeah, so now we move on to the actual approval of the first revision of the budget as presented by Marcy just now. So I would entertain a motion for that.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Oh, sorry, John.
We have a motion by Director Heidman with a second by Director Spear. Any more further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed,
Aye.
same sign. Motion passes. All right, next up we have the approval of the Partner Ed contract for the strategic plan for Brainerd Public Schools.
So you want to pull up the draft timeline?
Yeah, this is put in here, right, okay.
So you're just, so at the previous board meeting, you approved Partner Ed. So their job then was to issue a proposal and contract. So that's what is in your board packet. So that's for you to discuss and make a motion on. Then on top of that, I'll give you a presentation. They gave a draft timeline and it's very fluid. So based on what was in board packet to what I'm going to have Brian pull up is different based on some of the questions and concerns we continue to bring forth to them. So
They got changed.
So do you have any specific questions regarding the contract as proposed by, that I can be of assistance with?
For the benefit of the entire board, I think the only question that I had earlier when we first got this was regarding the community sessions. The contract as presented with the fee had 2 community sessions with a bullet point caveat in there that we could add additional ones for, I believe, $1,200 a piece, plus travel expenses for the folks to come up and do those. And I think both Director Spear and I went back and asked questions, about the feeling that we felt at minimum we should probably think about adding at least a third, and then wait and kind of see what sort of interaction and demand we get from the community and wanting to be part of that. But we want to make sure that all those voices get included and heard. And $1,200 seems like a small price to pay for that, at least. So I guess those were the only questions I had. But it looks like Director Heidman, you have a question?
It appears, based upon what I'm reading here, for $1,200, we get 3 additional site meetings. Am I reading that wrong?
Well, I'll give you a little bit, that's where I really sought clarification, and that's where so their draft timeline is, I think this is going to continue to be fluid. So this was talking to Denise Pontrelli, because I said the same thing. Can you tell us more about what this means by listening sessions? And really what happens is we're looking at 3 separate dates, but there's multiple listening sessions where they're going to be trying to get a student group, multiple community groups, and then looking at a community business leaders listening session. And so originally in that document that was, and that's the one that was in the original board document, they had that once, and we have that being repeated. So if I drop down, so if you look at March 7th and they come back on site, and then they come back on site on the 11th. So they're repeating those, but there's multiple listening sessions happening throughout that day, depending on the target audience or the target groups. And really, my recommendation, because they had now I gotta look, key community stakeholder committee. So what's going to happen is they're going to ask for different people from those listening sessions to really form a community stakeholder committee group. They're hoping to learn who those people are, and so we've moved that down to the 11th. So in the original proposal, they had all these things crammed up, I think, close in March. And what I've asked is, could you really spread them out and slow that down so we can gather lots of feedback? In addition, they're putting the community stakeholder survey out in the middle of that. So they're going to have a couple listening sessions and then put a broader stakeholder survey out to everyone. And then they also did the same thing with staff. In their original proposal, too, that was in the board packet, our profile of a graduate, they were trying to intermingle that at the same time. And so they had listening sessions attached to that. And I said, to me, this is very confusing, because if I'm a stakeholder, am I working on the strategic plan input, or am I looking at our graduate profile? And so one of the recommendations that I asked is, could we really focus and spread out the timeline so we really gather input on the front end of our strategic plan, and then once the strategic plan is outlined, then move into the profile of a graduate, because there's lots of data that's going to come, I believe, from all that input to help us further down that discussion. So this timeline is actually very fluid. When I talked to Denise Pontrelli and then Julie Crisp is the other consultant, they said, if you want to have 5 dates, if you want to have 8 dates, we're going to do what you need to do. But this is at least the start of that template, and they said based on what they're learning and the attendance and the input, then we can start to expand. So my goal was to kind of get us through that first part of April, and then based on feedback or input we're getting, we can continue to adjust that timeline. But that was my concern as well, is can you tell me why it says this? But on those dates, there's multiple listening sessions that will occur and multiple opportunities for people to engage. They're doing some back-to-back to try to help with lunchtime, right after school, evening time, again, to provide that opportunity.
So Dr. Hahn and board members, let me see that. I just want to clarify this. So we get 2 focus stakeholder meetings that is included in $12,000 plan, and any additional stakeholder meetings are $1,200 each plus travel plus expenses. Am I correct on that?
And I would count that, Director Ward, as a day. So when you have that session, it's a full day, so there's multiple sessions built in that day, based on the clarification I received from.
So do each of those.
Okay.
Sorry.
So when you see that additional $1,200, that's going to add a full day. So in that one,
Yes.
if that one, so we have 3 different, actually there's 5 different on those back-to-back. That's what's included in that on-site session. So you're correct, $1,200
Okay.
would add another set of those.
So as I add up the total cost, it comes to $21,300 plus expenses. Am I wrong on that?
That is what I took away from their proposal as well.
That supposes or presupposes that we adopt the portrait of a graduate module, which is like $6,000. Which maybe, can you give a little more color on what that is exactly? Their
Yeah, so
proposal
that-
had a paragraph, but that was about it. And Director
Right.
Donlinger had some questions about that earlier today as well.
And so they have their exemplars in there too. So it's another whole separate opportunity of stakeholder engagement from both the community, the business community, and internal staff to say, what do we expect graduates from Brainerd Public Schools to possess? So what assets, what skills, what are we looking for? And so it's really, it's going to be the portrait. These are the things that our graduates are going to come with. And that we are going to guarantee, and we are setting all our priorities to meet that profile of the graduate. So there's lots of skill sets and attributes and trainings. You know, it might be critical thinking skills, it might be the ability to, teamwork, it might be, but they put that all together and they say, we in Brainerd Public's assure that our graduates are going to meet these expectations.
Right, so it goes through a similar process. The difference is that it's, the other ones are holistic in the sense of putting together a strategic plan for K through 12, where Portrait of a Graduate is really focused on
It's really specific.
12th grade graduation outcome, what that
Correct.
student looks like, what they possess.
And that's when the original one that's in your packet, which I did not get to speak to them till like 4:15 today, they had them crosswalking together. So like they were doing them at the same time, which my concern was, so if you send out the community stakeholder survey for strategic planning, and then 3 weeks later, community gets a stakeholder survey for Portrait of a Graduate, even though they look different, am I going to understand what's being asked? And so separating them, to me, made more sense, but that's really at your direction.
So when we approved this last board meeting, if my memory is correct, it was for 13,400 or something like that, was it not?
That was for the base, so that was the foundational strategic plan
Right.
with the additional listening session. When you add the portrait of a graduate, that was an
Right.
additional 6, so that's been included in the proposal because it was discussed at the board that that was a facet or a piece that you'd like to include.
Yeah, what we essentially.
But didn't
approved
we
at
as
the
a
last board meeting, John, was hiring this company instead of MSBA, and then to review the proposal at
Right.
this meeting to select from the menu of what's available.
And so this is, their proposal is based on what, from that menu, because their menu is a whole laundry list of what was identified as key, of key importance.
But, Mr. Chair, I absolutely remember that based on a figure of 13.4, that was, that was a figure that a lot of people used in making their decision, period. And so now we're back. I mean, now if we include the portrait of the graduate, which I think every aspect of their menu is important, which was included in the SBA proposal. So I'm not opposed. I mean, I think it's absolutely important for all of the menu to be there, not just a part deal, but a full meal deal, as I've stated before. So, I just, when we voted on this, I was wondering why we went with a 13,400 plan versus, what we need to do, not what, what the numbers said or whatever. So that's just what I wanted to bring forth. So are we looking at the whole plan then, Mr. Chair and the board members? Is that what we're looking at?
That's the item for discussion.
Right.
I have
Right.
Yeah.
another question. Do you have, can you anticipate how much travel expenses are going to be?
They're located in the cities, so you're looking at mileage, and then, I would add a hotel cost for when they go back to back. I don't anticipate major expenses because they're local. They're not coming from Iowa or Michigan as some of the other consultants might have come from. They're local in the metro area, and actually Julie's over in Alexandria and Denise is down by the metro. So
And then Denise did say when she was here physically that if they were doing community listening sessions and they were here past 5 or 6 o'clock, that they would spend the night. They would not try to send their staff home on
And actually,
March
that's why you
roads.
look at, they're trying to do back-to-back. So they'll do so many stakeholders, you know, the afternoon and then bring back another group the next day. So there will be some hotel expense.
And it does feel like a good value for what they've laid out in the plan. And I do think the portrait of a graduate is important. I think it personifies what we're prioritizing and kind of names that out loud of what that looks like when we've accomplished that. I like that. And I love the sequence of events and the new timeline much more. That was smart.
And I think our goal is, you know, I think they're going to be fluid because as things happen, there's that flexibility to adapt or respond. Our goal will be to communicate out as early as possible. That's why I think, again, getting out that first date all the way through April of these are the concrete, these are where they're going to be at and get those invitations sent out is very timely rather than trying that the original calendar. That was my anxiety too when I first saw it. It was very condensed. And I didn't feel that was, it felt like we were going to run along rather than take our time.
And we need to offer at least 2 separate dates for community listening sessions, and this accommodates that really well.
And actually, you should see it'll be 2 separate dates, and then there should be a repeated pattern of 2 separate dates, and then getting into those real key stakeholder focus groups to then continue to move the work forward.
Yeah.
So by doing that, do we need to add additional on-site meetings then? Well, I mean, this is saying 3 is included in the quote.
Right.
This is accurate then?
Correct.
Okay.
Dr. Heidman, I believe you were.
I am a little concerned about the portrait of the graduate, only from the standpoint, isn't that supposed to be a goal and an objective of the school district?
And actually, we have a whole measure right
So
now for
wouldn't-
career readiness and college readiness. This is giving the opportunity, so again, that's all set by state standards and work that's being done. The goal is with input, what is our community, internal and external stakeholders feeling are key attributes and pieces that our graduates need to possess. So
Okay.
I can see if I can pull up on the.
I'm still struggling with, I would think that would be part of a goal, an objective of the whole strategic plan, not a separate issue that costs almost, you know, I mean, for the whole plan, we're spending 12 grand, and then just for the one thing with the portrait of graduate, that's $6,000. I guess I'm struggling with that. But I would think that would be part of the overall strategic plan, is to graduate people that are ready to face the world. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
Well, one of the ways I was looking at it, and that's a good point, I hadn't thought about it that way, but one of the ways I was looking at it is, you know, we put together this strategic plan and we say, this is what's really important to our district. These are the 5 things that we're going to really focus our attention on, not that everything else goes away, but this helps us prioritize our budget, all of our planning within the district. And so then we say, okay, so if those things happen, what does a graduate coming out of our district look like? What kind of skills will they possess? Like, for example, if we were to say we've got a strategy around career in tech, if we're putting a focus on that, it's super important to us. What does that look like then for a graduate coming out of our school district? What kinds of skills will they have? Because that's really important to us, if that makes sense. So it translates
It does.
the plan into what will this look like? What will the outcome be for an individual student?
Yeah. It does, but I was just thinking that would be part of the overall strategic plan and not a separate.
So with this, with Partner Ed, it is a separate. So I pulled up, so in your materials that you've had, these have all been linked so that was the grid that we created with all the consultants where we had them answer all the questions and they gave you all their proposals. So this is an example of a portrait of a graduate that they did, and they did the work with Alexandria. So they really looked at, based on all the input from internal, external stakeholders. So in this example, they wanted their graduates to be self-directed, strong communicators, strong collaborators, critical thinkers, civically and globally engaged, and then creative thinkers. Besides all the content that they have to master, these were key attributes that they wanted the school district to really focus on and be able to explain in instruction how they're meeting these key attributes. And so then they spent the time of defining what that looks like. So this is another example from Columbus, Ohio. I think there were 4 that they put in their packet. So they do that through listening sessions again and through stakeholder feedback. So this was a separate add-on with this consulting firm. So they do this for school districts.
Structured? I can't remember.
MSBA really didn't do a portrait of a graduate. This was a unique attribute to Partner Ed. So it's a proposal. Like I said, when I looked at their timeline, I wanted to pull them apart because, again, I think, like I said too, can't this be tied in because we're going to be gathering lots of information? This really refines it. So again, those samples were in your previous packets in November, December, January.
So Dr. Hahn, I'm assuming that the questions on the survey that they're going to put out to the staff, to the community, to business leaders, that the questions on the survey will come from the listening sessions, and then they will put together a survey related to the listening sessions. Is that correct?
Correct. And they actually, with a portrait of a graduate, a lot of these attributes they already have. It's just really working directly with your community, specifically to your community. What should that portrait of a graduate look like? So again, that's one facet of it.
We're not deciding on this tonight, are we? As far as how much money we're going to spend? I mean, we've already approved Partner Ed, right?
So
Right, but we have to approve the contract, and the contract's going to specify which services we wish to engage them for, which is either one or both, sort of thing.
Okay.
So am I right in thinking that the strategic plan is a general plan? Portrait of a graduate kind of refines what our general plan is in terms of the skills.
This is really student specific. When you look at a strategic plan, there might be things about facilities. There might be things about budgets. There might be things about, athletic complexes. I mean, really it's our roadmap. I mean, everything we do is about improving student achievement. That's everything we're going to do. Anything that ties into our strategic plan better have a direct impact on what we're doing for our students. Portrait of a graduate allows us to really go in depth and refine and identify those critical facets or
Key
traits that we're looking for.
What I like about it is it's a nexus point where we can get direct feedback specific to this stuff from, I hate the term stakeholder groups because it's so generic sounding. I'm talking about the business community. I'm talking about various groups within the community. And then, of course, we're talking about parents and staff and everybody else as well. But specifically, I think business is probably the one that leaps to mind the most from me, where they're looking for, because what do we all hear? I mean, we all hear as we go around town, well, I sure wish the graduates from Brainerd sure came out and knew how to do this, or they knew how to do that, or they were ready for this to come right in, the ones that go right into workforce or whatever. I think the idea that they could have direct feedback into what that schematic looks like, that's what appeals to me about it.
So they're saying besides having their content mastery in their academic courses, these are the attributes they're looking for their students to have. So I've sat through their students who do a portfolio in Alexandria, and they present and they talk about, based on the portrait of a graduate, how have they learned to be a strong communicator? How have they learned to be a collaborator? What courses enhance that for them? What activities did they engage in that enhances to them? So it's allowing them, based on the experience they've had, to also create kind of a resume or a profile so as they step forward to apply for a job, or as they step forward to make a career or a college application. A lot of those students in Alexandria, based on this, are responding directly to those attributes. And then the question comes back from the community: how are you ensuring that my child that's going to graduate from your school meets these critical attributes? So again, it's a
One of the things,
unique facet to partner ed that was discussed when they presented.
Go ahead, Director Ward.
thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the things that I hope we do in, depending upon what happens with moving this forward or not, is that if we move it forward, I hope that we emphasize input from recent graduates, not 1-2 years, but 3, 4, 5 years down the road about their experience. I think that's critical and very important. And even with today's graduates as well, I'm the current graduates, I know that's important, but having a few years under your belt after graduation, you can look back on your public education career, K-12, pre-K-12, and give good input, give good insight, give good suggestions. So I hope we emphasize that moving forward of graduates from Brainerd in the last 3 to 4 or 5 years.
Well, I'd make a motion to approve the partner ed contract as presented.
I will second it.
And for a point of clarity, the contract as presented has portrait of graduate in it.
Yes.
Okay. We have a motion from Director Spear and a second from Director Brecken to approve the partner ed contract for the strategic plan as presented. Any further discussion? Director Heitman.
Yes, I'm going to be voting no. And the reason I'm going to be voting no is because of I feel the portrait of graduates should be part of the strategic plan. And that should be, at least in my opinion. So, otherwise, I am in favor of a strategic plan. I'm just not in favor of the portrait of graduate as being a separate piece of it, because I think it can be intertwined into the goals, objectives, and other things within the strategic plan. So I will be voting no, so just.
Any further discussion? Hearing no further discussion, those in favor of the approval of the partner ed contract as presented signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Motion passes. All right, on to the presentation.
Actually, I gave you the draft timeline while you were discussing,
Oh, yeah,
so we're good
we
there.
have that. And again, just a note, that's still fluid
Very fluid.
based upon, especially with the addition of portrait of graduate. But, it's nice the way that is restructured, at least for now. All right, so we'll move on to the approval of the second and final reading of the revised MSBA policies as presented by Angie Bennett.
Good evening. There were no recommendations for changes from the last board meeting, so this is just the second and final reading for public and private personnel data, the consent to release form, and the family medical leave policy. Are there any other questions or anything else folks saw as they were reviewing again?
All right, I will entertain a motion to approve.
So move.
Second.
Second.
Poor Director Ward dealing with the internet delay. We have a motion from Director Brecken and a second from Director Heidman to approve the second and final reading of revised MSBA policies 406, 406.1, and 410 as presented. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angie. I believe it's Director Murtha's turn. So Director Murtha will be presenting on the approval of the third and final reading of MSBA Policy 425 as presented.
Long entrance, short presentation. There have been no recommended changes to the original text that you have in front of you, so we ask for third and final approval of the policy 425.
I'll make a motion.
So moved.
We'll give you that one.
I didn't give him enough time. I'll second it.
We have a motion from on high from Director Ward and a second by Director Spear for the approval of the third and final reading of MSBA Policy 425 as presented. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Please remember, this is my shortest presentation ever.
I already texted Guinness while we were on the. All right. We have approval of the third and final reading of MSBA Policy 711 and 712.
I'll step in.
You standing in for Director Tisi?
Yes. If you guys have any questions.
No changes to these, right? And these went to a third and final reading because there were red lines originally in.
And they're new policies
New
coming.
policies, okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the third and final reading for numbers 711 and 712 as presented.
And I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion by Director Spear and a second by Director Brecken to approve 711 and 712 as presented. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Move on to informational with Brainerd Public Schools Foundation. Director Spear.
There has not been a meeting since the last time we gathered, but I would mention anyway, since it's this weekend, that the big event is this Saturday. So if you do not have tickets, there are, I think I looked, about 15 left, so hurry. Get on your phone right now, in fact.
We're down to single.
Single?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're lucky. It's
Great.
going to sell out.
And that doesn't mean you can't participate, because you can participate in the auction. You don't have to be there online. So 10th annual, it's at the Woods, and it's always an awesome fundraiser for the group. I would also share that the scholarship applications are open, both for the 4A grants for the schools and teaching staff, but also for our graduates that are coming up this year. So it's an exciting time for everybody out there filling out applications. I think the end of February is the timeline for the outgoing seniors, and the end of March is for the educators. So get out there, make your applications.
Thank you. Next is the Equity Task Force update by myself. We met the day after, it's 2 days after the last school board meeting we had back at the January 9th, so it was 10th or 11th that we met. The thrust of that particular meeting was that we had received survey data from the state of Minnesota that mirrored the same survey that we had done locally here at the district level of the student populations and things like that. So there was a lot of dialogue and discussion around how those compared and contrasted with each other. And what we really found as we started to dig through the information was that, as strange as it may sound, that the perceptions and responses to the surveys as it relates to student safety and other issues related to student concerns really were not all that different than what the state level data was. So we spent a lot of time in just dialogue about that and what that meant, how to interpret that. We listened to the student voices from our student members of the Equity Task Force to kind of get their input on it. And then we just sort of used that as a bridge to build on for our next meeting, which I can't remember when that's coming up, but it's
The 14th.
yeah, the idea is to get a little deeper into that. So it was a really interesting session because it was a little eye-opening, at least for me, to gain some insight into that things maybe aren't as different here as we sometimes think they are. And that's my report on that for now. And finally, we have Superintendent's report. Dr. Hahn.
No, I just, it's been a challenging start to the school year, and I'm looking at John and his administrative team. And I just want to thank them and the countless hours and all the support and the leadership that you've provided to the staff and the students and to the families. I want to say thank you to the entire administrative team. This is a team that when there's a need, they all jump in and they help cover and support, and we had lots of additional adults really trying to work and connect with our kids and keep eyes on our kids, knowing that they were struggling and hurting. And that's not just unique to Forest View, it just happens to be the way that's there right now. I'm very grateful to Northern Pines and the additional staff that they brought forth to help us support our students and continue to bring forth. To Mobile Crisis Outreach, we held a community event on Wednesday of last week too, to have some real direct discussions about children's mental health and the mental health issues that our students are facing and the challenges that exist for their parents and guardians in accessing services and needed services for our students. So I was very grateful for how quickly they could respond, and also extremely grateful to the Brainerd Lakes Ministerial Association. Every day we've had anywhere from 8 to 10 youth leaders in the buildings, and it's been good for our young students who are seeking out their youth leader to be able to have that time and that conversation. So our students carry a lot when they walk into our buildings, and there are many days that their concerns are bigger than just reading and writing and math. And these last couple of weeks have definitely been a reflection of that. And so again, I'm just very grateful to the leadership and grateful to the community response and partnership and to the families that have engaged with us as well. So thank you for the support, and I think it takes a village. It takes every single member of our community watching out for our kids, and I think last couple of weeks were a strong reflection of that. So,
Thank you. And just to go over the spate of, or the slate of future meetings here, January 30th, of course, tonight, the regular school board meeting. February is Minnesota School Board Recognition Month. And then we have the MSBA Board Chair Chat on February 1st at 8 a.m. February 3rd, the BLACC Eggs and Issues at Madden's. For those that don't know what that is, what is that?
so the chamber has our area representatives all out at Madden, so it'll be a time where we can engage in question and conversation. So I plan on heading out there and interacting with our local elected officials and learn more about where they're headed with. Hopefully, educational budget will probably be the key of lots of my questions, but we'll be partnered with many members of our business community as well.
And finally, we have our next regularly scheduled school board meeting, February 13th, in this very spot. So that covers all of that. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion from Director Heidman with a second by
Not even-
Director Spear to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much.